Imagine getting into an elevator, pressing a button, and stepping out in space. No rocket, no fire, no crushing G-force. Just a smooth ride up a cable, out of the atmosphere, past where satellites orbit, into the black. It sounds like pure science fiction, but a real Japanese construction company, the same one that built one of the tallest towers on Earth, has published a detailed plan to build exactly this. A cable stretching 96,000 kilometers into space. That's not a typo. 96,000. A quarter of the way to the moon. And they've put a date on it, 2050. The catch? To make it work, you have to break some of the most basic rules of how we normally build anything.
Here's how they plan to pull it off. And the one problem that could stop it cold.
Now, watch why anyone would even attempt this. Here's the dirty secret of space travel. Rockets are a terrible way to get to orbit. To escape Earth, a rocket has to reach around 40,000 kilometers an hour. And to do that, it has to burn an enormous amount of fuel. Most of a rocket is just fuel to lift the rest of the fuel. It's violent, it's dangerous, and it's staggeringly expensive. Every kilogram you send up costs a fortune, and most of the rocket is destroyed or discarded on the way. For decades, this has been the wall between us and space. Getting off the planet is the single hardest, most expensive part. So engineers asked a wild question. What if you didn't launch into space at all? What if you just climbed?
Built a road straight up, anchored to the ground, reaching all the way into orbit, and rode a vehicle up it like an elevator in a building.
No explosion, no escape velocity, just a steady climb. If it worked, the cost of reaching space could collapse from thousands of dollars per kilogram to a tiny fraction of that. It would be the biggest change to space travel since the rocket itself. And this idea is far older than you'd think. Back in 1895, a Russian schoolteacher named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, one of the founding minds of rocketry, stood looking at the newly built Eiffel Tower and imagined a tower so tall it reached all the way to orbit. For over a century after that, the space elevator lived only in the minds of scientists and science fiction writers. The legendary author Arthur C. Clarke built an entire novel around one and was asked when he thought it would actually be built. His famous answer, roughly, about 50 years after everyone stops laughing. For 100 years, everyone laughed.
A material came along that made people stop. This microscopic glass vial holds that innovation. Its implications are truly groundbreaking.
Now here's the mind-bending part, how a cable can even stand up into space without falling down. And to get this, you have to throw away your normal intuition about buildings. A skyscraper stands because it pushes down into the ground. A space elevator is the opposite. It doesn't stand up, it hangs down. It's held up from above by spinning. Here's the trick, and it's beautiful. The Earth is turning. Anything in geostationary orbit, about 36,000 kilometers up, circles the planet exactly once a day, staying locked over the same spot on the ground. Now imagine a cable anchored to the equator and reaching all the way up past that orbit. As the Earth spins, the far end of that cable gets flung outward, exactly like a ball on a string when you whirl it around your head.
Here, next to this massive counterweight, the cable is impossibly taut. It's a testament to engineering, holding against the pull of gravity. This is the backbone of the future.
The cable isn't standing on the ground, it's being held taut by the spin of the entire planet. And that's why the numbers are so insane. To generate enough outward pull to keep the cable rigid and balanced, it can't just reach orbit and stop. It has to extend far, far beyond it. All the way out to 96,000 kilometers, with a giant counterweight on the end. That counterweight, a mass of around 12,500 tons, sits at the very tip, flung outward by Earth's rotation, pulling the entire cable tight like the stone at the end of a sling. On paper, madness, but the physics is sound. The problem isn't the idea, the problem is building it. So let's go through the real problems, one by one, because each one forces a bizarre solution. Problem 1, the material. And this is the big one, the problem that could kill the whole project.
Think about what this cable has to survive. It has to hold up its own weight across 96,000 kilometers, plus the climbers riding on it, plus the pull of that massive counterweight.
No material humans have ever mass-produced comes remotely close. Steel would snap under its own weight long before it reached orbit. It's not even close. For 100 years, this single fact is what kept the space elevator locked in science fiction. There was simply nothing strong enough to build the cable out of. Then, in 1991, a Japanese scientist named Sumio Iijima helped bring attention to a strange new material, carbon nanotubes. Tubes of carbon atoms rolled into cylinders thinner than a strand of DNA. and their strength is almost unbelievable. In theory, around 20 times stronger than steel for their weight. Suddenly, on paper, a cable to space became physically possible. This is the material the entire plan depends on. But
here's the honest, uncomfortable truth. We can make carbon nanotubes that are tiny, millimeters, centimeters long.
making a flawless carbon nanotube cable tens of thousands of kilometers long with no weak point anywhere along its entire length is something no one on Earth can do yet. One flaw, one weak spot, and the whole thing snaps. This is the wall, and it hasn't been broken. So how does a company put a date of 2050 on it anyway? Because the plan is to build the manufacturing capability alongside everything else, betting that nanotube technology will mature in time. It's a gamble on human progress. And that's important to be honest about. This is a serious, detailed engineering concept, but it depends on a material breakthrough that hasn't happened yet. And here's what makes people take it seriously anyway. This isn't a plan from a random dreamer. It comes from Obayashi Corporation, one of Japan's oldest and largest construction firms. The company that built the Tokyo Skytree, one of the tallest towers on the planet.
Standing at the base of this awe-inspiring skyscraper, its scale is truly breathtaking. The engineering is remarkable, a true symbol of modern achievement.
Working with a Japanese university, researchers have already flown a miniature test in orbit. 2 tiny satellites connected by a short cable, with a little motorized box designed to crawl along it. A space elevator the size of a shoebox, testing the basic motion of a climber moving along a tether in the vacuum of space. It's a baby step, but it's a real one. Now assume for a moment we solve the material. Problem 2. How do you even build a cable 96,000 kilometers long? You obviously can't build it up from the ground. A tower that tall would collapse instantly. So the plan flips the whole thing upside down. You build in space and lower down. First, rockets carry the equipment up and assemble a spacecraft in low orbit. That craft climbs to geostationary altitude, and then it does something clever. It starts spooling out cable in both directions at once.
Welcome. Today we examine the scales of justice. These scales must remain perfectly balanced, a symbol of fairness and equilibrium in our system. Thank you.
If you only dropped cable downward, the whole thing would fall out of orbit. By feeding it out up and down at the same time, the system stays balanced around that geostationary point the entire time it's being built. Eventually, that thin first thread reaches the ground and is anchored. But a single thread is far too weak to carry anything. So, problem 3. How do you turn a thread into a highway? The answer is elegant. You send small robotic climbers up the thread, and as each one climbs, it lays down more nanotube material, reinforcing the cable, thickening it, strand by strand. The cable builds itself up, climber by climber, over years, until it's strong enough to carry 100-ton loads. The elevator constructs its own track by climbing it. Problem 4. The anchor. Where do you tie down the bottom end of a cable that's holding up a 12,000-ton counterweight in space?
Not just anywhere. It has to be on the equator, because that's where Earth's spin gives the strongest, most stable outward pull, and where the cable can hang straight up without being dragged sideways.
And the plan doesn't anchor it to dry land. It anchors it to a floating platform in the ocean, a structure they call the Earth Port, around 400 meters across, sitting on the sea near the equator. Why float it? So it can be moved. If a threat is coming, a storm or a piece of space debris swinging toward the cable, a floating base can be repositioned to dodge it. You can't move a mountain. You can move a ship. Which brings us to problem 5. Everything in space is trying to destroy this cable. 96,000 kilometers of thin ribbon is an enormous target hanging in space for years, decades, forever. Space debris, dead satellites and fragments, moving at kilometers per second, could sever it in an instant. It passes through the Van Allen radiation belts, zones of intense radiation that bombard anything inside them. At the bottom, near the ocean anchor, it faces lightning, typhoons, and corrosive salt air.
A rocket flies through these dangers for minutes. This cable has to survive them permanently.
So the design has to include ways to track incoming debris and shift the cable out of the way, and to route climbers and shield electronics against the radiation on the ride up. And there's a nightmare scenario engineers have to plan for. What happens if the cable actually snaps? A broken tether 96,000 kilometers long doesn't just fall in a heap. The physics gets strange. Depending on where it breaks, the upper section, no longer held down, could go flying outward into space, pulled away by the counterweight. And the lower section would come down, potentially draping across thousands of kilometers of the Earth's surface as the planet turns beneath it. Designing a structure this big means also designing for its failure, making sure that if the worst happens, it fails as safely as something this enormous possibly can. That's part of why the anchor floats at sea, far from cities, on the empty equator. And speaking of the ride, here's a detail that surprises everyone. This is not a quick trip. The climbers are planned to move at around 200 kilometers an hour. That sounds fast, until you remember the station is 36,000 kilometers up.
Do the math, and the journey to the geostationary station takes about a week. A week, riding an elevator, slowly leaving the Earth behind beneath you.
You'd watch the sky fade from blue to black, watch the planet curve away below, and keep climbing for days. It's less like a rocket launch and more like a slow train to orbit. And the ride itself would feel deeply strange. As a climber ascends, it isn't just moving up. The Earth is rotating, and the climber's weight actually changes with height. Down low, you feel normal gravity pulling you to the floor. But as you rise toward the geostationary station, that station is orbiting at exactly the speed that cancels gravity out. So around 36,000 kilometers up, you'd become weightless, floating, as if gravity had switched off. Climb even higher, past that point toward the counterweight, and something wild happens. The outward centrifugal pull takes over and down flips direction. Now you'd feel pushed towards space instead of toward Earth. A single elevator ride where up slowly becomes down. There's also a subtle sideways tug. Because the Earth is spinning, a climber moving up the cable gets nudged against it, and the whole cable leans ever so slightly.
Nothing about this ride is like anything a human has ever felt. And that raises a problem people rarely think about.
How do you power a climber for a week-long trip tens of thousands of kilometers up? It can't carry fuel. That would defeat the entire point of not being a rocket. It can't drag a power cord that long. So the leading ideas are wireless. Beam the energy to the climber from outside. For example, with powerful lasers or focused sunlight aimed at panels on the climber, feeding it electricity the whole way up. The vehicle sips power out of a beam of light while it crawls the cable. No engine, no fuel tank. Just a motor, a set of wheels gripping the ribbon, and energy delivered from a distance. But if it ever works, the payoff is staggering. Sending cargo to space today costs a fortune per kilogram. On a space elevator, once it's built, the cost could fall toward just tens of dollars per pound, because you're not burning a mountain of fuel every time. You're just running an electric motor up a cable. That changes everything. Building giant structures in orbit becomes affordable. Solar power stations in space.
Launch points for missions to the Moon and Mars, in fact that far counterweight, whipping around at 96,000 kilometers, could fling spacecraft toward Mars using nothing but Earth's rotation, like releasing a sling.
The elevator wouldn't just be a road to orbit. It would be a catapult to the rest of the solar system. Here's the bottom line. The space elevator is the ultimate test of a single idea. That if you understand the physics deeply enough, you can do things that look completely impossible. The engineering plan is real and detailed. The physics genuinely works. A spinning planet really can hold a cable up. The anchor, the counterweight, the climbers, the deployment, all of it has been thought through. There is exactly one thing standing in the way. A cable material we cannot yet build. Everything else is engineering. That one thing is a miracle we're still waiting on. And whether it's Japan in 2050 or someone else later, the moment we can spin threads strong enough, the door to space stops being something we blast through and becomes something we simply ride up to. But climbing to space on a thread is a dream still waiting on a material. What about the impossible things humans have already finished? A bridge across a canyon so deep, they call it the crack in the earth, or an airport on an island that sinks a little more every year.
That's next time. If you love watching humans take on the impossible, subscribe. This is the kind of story we break down here. See you at the next impossible structure.